So today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now on episode 86 of the series, and in the previous episode we saw that the Libyan Civil War carried on. We saw that the Indonesians officially became Unitarian, and with that they signed a military and economic alliance with the Canadian Unitarians. Some economic alliance expansion occurred. Oh, and most importantly, Russia is at war with Poland and Ukraine. So if you guys do enjoy today's episode of WICSO, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We are getting super close to releasing, first of all, the 200,000 subscribers special merch, but also all of the WICSO merch. As of me recording this last Monday, I have a majority of the WICSO designs done. I still need to work on the 200k stuff, but just know that that should probably be releasing next week. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. So previously we saw a war break out between Russia, Ukraine, and Poland. Now it is important to remember that there are some military alliances at play here. So Russia is allied with the Teal team down here, and they're also allied with Libya. However, they won't be getting involved in the war due to their internal issues, as you can see. And then there's a military alliance between the Golden Team and Poland. These three countries had militarized the borders with each other, and eventually a skirmish broke out on the border. However, Russian troops appeared to have just started to invade into Ukraine. So what really happened isn't too well known, but let's get straight into the fighting. So as I was just saying, we have Russian troops starting to advance into Ukrainian territory. It does appear that they're kind of on a roll here, so maybe Russia did kind of have a plan to invade Ukraine, and they just used the border skirmish as a pretext to do so. The origin of the war isn't super important though. What is important is who's going to win this war. Now at this point in time, Russia is a very strong country, and in fact they are now the 10th strongest country in the world, starting to reclaim a lot of that old valuable Russian land that they had under the Russian Empire, as they like to refer to it. And then as for Poland and Ukraine, they aren't really super close to the top 10. That is reserved for countries like America, West Africa, China, Australia, and India, among others. But as Russia continues to invade into this northern area, we do see another front line open over here in the Donbass area, and that kind of reinforces the theory that maybe Russia was planning this. Now, just because they were planning it doesn't necessarily mean that they had, planned for it to happen right now. Having war plans for this kind of thing would be kind of smart, considering that these guys are in an alliance to literally oppose you. But Russian troops move in, and Ukraine is immediately at risk. Now, what about Poland? Well, Polish troops aren't really messing around. Now, similar to real life, Poland has a little bit of a history with Russia. They were once a part of Russia, or more so split between them and the Dutch Republic, whereas the Gold Team was a part of the old empire mostly. So there's that historic tension that Russia has with Poland, and when these Polish divisions start to move into Russian territory, they are experiencing a ton of success, especially up here in the northern area near Estonia. Now, the occurrence of this conflict between three Assembly of Nations members has some of the General Assembly relatively worried about more so Russia's power and how strong they're becoming, seeing as they are a dictatorship and seeing how as they are kind of this rogue state at this point that just keeps invading other countries. So most of the Assembly will be backing Poland and Ukraine, but they won't be getting involved directly because that would just cause a big world war, and we don't really want that to happen. Russian forces will go ahead and start an encirclement campaign over here near the border, and that campaign is very successful as they're able to not only encircle these troops, but create a very long distance for the Gold Team to try to get back to these troops. And slowly but surely, Russia will squeeze them out, heavily weakening this front line over here. With the occurrence of that, Russian forces now push through the only remaining area without occupying troops. From here, one whole front line is created. Additionally, down in the Black Sea area, the Russian and Ukrainian navies are going at it. Now, the navies of these two countries are actually pretty comparable, and that's due to the fact that Russia hasn't really historically at all been too concerned with naval war. Now, the last time that was relevant was in World War III, the War of the Greats between them and the Old Empire, and their navy really got beat up by the Old Empire's navy. But there aren't any other powers near Russia that can really rival them, and on top of that, they don't have a lot of coast along the Black Sea or even the Baltic Sea, so Russia isn't too invested in their navy, whereas the Gold Team down here is, of course, also going to be invested mostly in like their land invasion troops. But you'll notice that they have a pretty big coast along the Black Sea, so there's a little bit more of an emphasis on their navy compared to Russia, but even then, they are still pretty hand in hand. Anyway though, Ukraine isn't just going to sit here and get absolutely flabbergasted. They will push back, and specifically there's a counteroffensive that takes place in the north near the capital of Russia. Now this is going to heavily worry Russia because Ukrainian troops are a direct threat to their capital city. And not only that, but Polish troops are right over here. They are pretty close as well, so Russia wants to make sure that their capital city is as safe as possible. So it is likely that they would send reinforcements to secure this area. That could lead to a small counteroffensive by Ukrainian forces down here in the south, but even then, most of the Ukrainian forces are simply overwhelmed by Russian forces. Russia will now capture this major city here in central Ukraine, which is pretty vital for the infrastructure of the country. It connects the north up down here to the coastal south area. But if Russia really wants to do damage to Ukraine's infrastructure, this key city right here is the most important infrastructural city for Ukraine. Not only does their just civilian infrastructure go through there, but their military infrastructure is heavily focused in this area. So Russian forces will begin to undo the counteroffensive in the north, retaking this major city here, and eventually a plan is devised. You're going to want to go down this road and then down this road as well. That will take you to this major city. However, there is a little bit of a problem over here in the Baltic theater. Poland isn't being pushed back, and Russian forces are failing to secure their own land as Poland reaches all the way up here to the Gulf of Finland. That will separate a ton of troops over here in Estonia, and Polish forces will begin to squeeze in. And on top of that, they also capture this major Russian city over here. Poland will then start to move out, heading towards this major city, while just south of that, occupying forces move in even more. Russia is kind of at a dance with time here. Poland is threatening them a lot, and Ukraine is taking a while to go ahead and occupy. Russia needs to get one under their belt before they deal with the other. They can't necessarily deal with both at the same time due to just kind of the sporadicness of the front line. So a risky operation is commenced in Ukraine to hammer a ton of troops south. And unfortunately for Ukraine, this really risky operation pays off as Russia is able to capture this major city. This is a huge loss for Ukraine and reinforces Russia's occupation of the northern regions. No longer can any kind of convoy sneak up there and supply any troops holding out. That is over. The infrastructure has fallen. We also see Russia start to heavily push back over here in the Azov region, now reaching towards this major city here, which is right off the Crimean Peninsula where Ukraine's capital lies. Back up north, Polish forces are getting closer and closer to Russia's capital city, now on the outskirts of this major city right here. Now though, we're going to take a slight break from the Russian war and we're going to head down here to Libya, where their civil war is having a very interesting development. Now in the last video, I did ask you guys like what color you would consider this rebellion group, and I saw a lot of people saying maroon. Now I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I feel like maroon is a little bit more defined, a little bit darker, but we're just going to be rolling with it because why not? It's a very light maroon. Anyway, the rebellion in the south here is seeing a lot of success in taking out these kind of outlandish areas of Libya where there's not a whole lot of people. This allows them to occupy a ton of land down here in the Libyan desert as they start to reach down into some of the southernmost regions of the country. Now back up north though, the actual government of Libya has had a lot of success in pushing back the rebels in this area, and they are now right on the outskirts of pretty much all three of these major cities. Actually four, I can't count, but that is something that is definitely dangerous for this country. They don't want to lose their stronghold. Down here, once again, not a lot of people, no major cities, so they definitely want to hold on to this, even if it isn't valuable. So this definitely isn't as valuable as this. But remember, this is a multi-front war, and the Green Rebels, seeing all the success of the Maroon team, are now going to start a new operation in the south of Libya. They feel like controlling this land, similar to the Maroon country, would benefit them as a group. It could maybe even start to threaten the main Libyan government, seeing as like, you know, you've lost all this land. Maybe your people are scared because they've lost so much land, even if it isn't valuable. But the Green team will also start to push down into this area, and eventually all of the south of Libya is occupied by rebel forces. Now, the Maroon country and the Green country, well, if the Green country and the Yellow country didn't get along, these guys also are definitely not going to get along. The Maroon country kind of sees this as like a united Libyan effort to overthrow the dictatorship. They don't see room for any other groups to get their independence out of this, whereas the Green team and the Yellow team kind of recognize that, you know, maybe there's going to be multiple Libyas after the civil war, but the Maroon country doesn't stand for that. They want only one Libya, and with that in mind, they're going to be fighting up against the Green country. And unfortunately for the Maroon rebels, the terrorists are going to have an extreme advantage down here in the south as they start to push the Maroon forces out of this area. Also, back over here in the Yellow country, we have two of their groups being wiped out by the Green team, but the Yellow team does make some strides to re-get some of their land. Re-get? I don't know if that's the right word. Retake probably works better. They also move out into the red team, pushing back some of their forces. But back up in the Mediterranean country, there is a whole nother front happening up here, and it just isn't going well for the Mediterranean country at all. With the success of the proxies in the south of the Mediterranean country, even more groups will begin to show their faces, which might highlight the fact that the Mediterranean country has had some internal issues that they haven't been completely honest about. At the same time though, it can also stem from like these guys inspiring other groups to rise up and join their cause. So that's a possibility as well. But the Mediterranean country is in some deep water at this point as the terrorist groups start to all link up with each other. Eventually, these guys will meet at the northern border of West Africa, where there are a ton of cities, and West Africa is pretty much going to put their entire military on the border, and they're going to be like, hey, don't do it. We're not going to get involved in this little bit of a skirmish, but if we have to, we will. Don't cross our border, and the terrorists will more likely than not definitely have to go along with that because, well, I mean, West Africa would steamroll all of Libya, relatively easily too. But back down to the southern offensive, the Maroon rebels begin to move up a little bit more, fighting back against some pretty strong Libyan forces in this area. Remember, there was a counteroffensive by Libya here where a ton of their forces were staged, but at this point, they are, they're beating them back. Libya's government is in a pretty sticky situation. They have multiple fronts to work with, multiple groups they're fighting against, so their troops are constantly moving around. Previously, they might have been down here and then over here, but now they are up here, mostly focusing on this area. So this will allow for the Maroon rebels to move up and back into this area they once occupied. Now though, we're jumping over to the red team real quick. Don't worry, nothing's happening. Or maybe you wanted something to happen, but it's not. There's been a recent phenomenon in the world that astrologers all over the globe are trying to figure out, and the red team is a pretty scientifically advanced country. There are a lot of great minds that come from this country, and they're trying to figure out why the night sky has all of a sudden been filled with stars. In ancient times, there was no stars in the sky. It was only the sun. Sure, there was the other planets, eventually as time went on, the telescope was invented. They found Mercury, Venus, Mars. And then in recent times, of course, they've found Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and even Pluto. But there were never stars in the sky. And all of a sudden, now the night sky is filled with not only stars, but like cosmic things, galaxies, extraterrestrial comets. The galaxy is being discovered by the WICSO world, but they're not too sure what it is. It just appeared out of nowhere, and scientists are scrambling to figure out what happened. So once again, unlike our world, this world didn't have a night sky. It was just the sun and the planets. It was just the solar system. But now everything else has been opened up. Very interesting. Anyway, back up to the Russian war. At this point in time, Ukraine's military in the area between these two front lines has completely collapsed as they fall back to this major city here. Russian forces will attempt to move in, however they are unsuccessful in doing so, and that leads to a very temporary counteroffensive in this region, but it is temporary for a reason as Russian troops move just south of that and now start to threaten to encircle the area which Ukraine has just taken. That's not good. They fall back to the city once again. And to make things even worse for Ukraine, this front line over here is also begin to fall as a ton of Russian troops begin to pour in, once again adopting that logistical plan to just kind of hammer troops in and hope for the best. And well, it's working to say the least. Russian troops will now meet all the way down this river and connect up with the Black Sea in two areas now, which will isolate this part of the country and then more importantly also isolate this part of the country over here. Now back up to Poland, their advance towards Russia's capital city has kind of slowed and it eventually stops right here. Russia's forces are able to hold off the Polish, but not only that, they start their own counteroffensive up here in the Baltic region and now reaching back over to Estonia and pushing back Polish troops. This major city right here will be recaptured by the Russians as they begin to meet the Polish border. Then Russian troops move into Poland. It would appear that they aren't too worried about taking back land. Instead, they're worried about sending a message to Poland like, hey, even though you have a ton of land in us, look what we've done to Ukraine, and look what we're doing to you. You're next. Basically, this is what that's saying. Back down south, Russian forces will successfully capture these two major cities, and with that, we have the holdout of just this one major city down here, who, defying Ukrainian orders, will go ahead and surrender. It is now a one-front war once again, and Russian forces are pummeling in. Eventually, Ukraine will make the decision to abandon the north and fall back to Crimea, and using the natural boundaries of this region, they will hold out. But with that occurrence, Russia has now freed up a ton of troops, and those troops will now begin the march north towards Poland. Poland, seeing this, is going to adopt Russia's strategy, basically hammer troops straight towards their capital city, and unlike Russia, this doesn't go so well. The communist government fails to do what Russia did, and they leave their forces extremely vulnerable. Russia will quickly move in and take advantage of this, recapturing this major city and also heading straight towards this one as well, where a big battle occurs. But more importantly, they start to round off the Polish troops that were getting towards their capital city. Additionally, back up north, the counteroffensive in Estonia is now going full steam ahead as they reach the Polish border completely. And then, as expected, they begin to move in, taking one Polish major city. The tide of the war has now completely shifted into Russia's favor. And to make things even worse, the Russian Navy has just successfully amphibiously landed over here in this part of Ukraine, encircling this major city over here, and eventually, after it holds out for a very long time, taking it. Now, the march towards Ukraine's capital is a very brutal one, but it's one that still goes in Russia's favor as they get closer and closer as the days go on. Additionally, a breakthrough in the north, despite a bridge being blown up, has led for Russian troops to go ahead and just spill completely into Crimea, and Ukraine is divided into three parts. And from here, after this major major city is captured, Ukraine is only to their capital city, and after Russian special forces break into the city and capture the president of the country, he will go ahead and agree to surrender as Ukraine loses the war. Russia has successfully taken down their biggest enemy to this day, and the one that had the most threat for them, of course, due to their proximity to the capital city. Now it's just Russia versus Poland. And with all the troops that were dealing with Ukraine now flooding to this front line, Poland is smacked in the face very, very harshly. They get a little bit of a reality check as Russian troops begin to pour into this country, taking major city after major city, and immediately starting to threaten the capital of Poland. They'll reach all the way over here to Kaliningrad and cut Poland into two pieces. The Latvian piece is kind of left to die. Poland isn't too worried about that. They're more worried about protecting their capital and major cities that remain. But with Russia's advance getting larger day by day, the government of Poland feels like they're kind of trapped. And after a few more weeks of fighting, Poland will actually surrender over to Russia. This was a big surprise to a lot of countries in Europe, seeing as Poland didn't really seem like the kind of country to just surrender before their capital city was even taken. Definitely in comparison to Ukraine, who fought till the very end. But Russia is victorious in their war against Ukraine and Poland, and we can go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. And in this treaty here, we see the unfortunate demise of the Gold Team / Ukraine, as Russia will fully annex that entire country. Additionally, they're a little bit greedy at the peace treaty, and they took a ton of land from Poland as well. Now, with that being said, that's all that Russia did. They only took land. They didn't change any governments. They didn't require any repayment of war reparations or anything like that. Simply, they took their land and that was it. Well, luckily for them, it was a lot of land and a lot of valuable land at that. All of Ukraine, I mean, they were, a mid-tier power. They were pretty strong as a country. So that's now all of yours, and then half of Poland, which, granted, it's not the most valuable parts of Poland, but still, it's a lot of land and still valuable land. Russia is feeling very good after their successful war against Poland and Ukraine, and to kind of demonstrate that, they're not going to put down their arms just yet, because now they're going to shift their focus to the brown country over here. The same troops that were just fighting in Poland and in Ukraine will only get a few weeks rest. Battle plans were already drawn up for the brown team, assuming that Russia was successful against Poland and Ukraine. And at this point, a lot of countries are speculating that Russia has battle plans for most of their neighbors. Now, I know that battle plans, of course, those are pretty common when you have a lot of countries around you that you don't like, but these are more so invasive battle plans, not like defensive battle plans. We know that the family that's been in charge of Russia for a few decades now is, they're a little bit imperialist, they like their land, but this is just flaunting at this point. Russia seems like an unstoppable force, and that is highlighted once again by the fact that they have just defeated yet another country just weeks after taking out Ukraine and Poland. They will fully annex the brown country, and the dictator of this country will declare victory. The Russian Empire has been restored. They have gotten almost all of the land that they've wanted. And that's what he says in his speech to the nation, and unfortunately for the world, the Russian people are completely behind this at this point. They are seeing the glory that this dictator has brought to Russia, and his approval ratings, not being tampered with, they're actually statistically correct, are through the roof. Russia now snatches the chain of Rome as the most nationalistic country in the world, and that's something that is extremely dangerous. And the Assembly of Nations sees this, and they see how dangerous Russia has become. They see how they have been violating other members of the Assembly of Nations, and a decision is made by the General Assembly to also suspend Russia as their status of a member of the Assembly of Nations. So Russia now joins Libya in suspended status. And Russia's leader could not care less. They just used the Assembly as a ploy to get international influence. They don't really need it. Heading back over to Poland, just briefly real quick, the government in Poland has collapsed. Not in a sense that the country is falling into civil war, not in a sense that a bunch of rebellions are going to pop up or anything like that, but more so, the actual government has collapsed. Now, in real life, you hear about governments collapsing all the time. You hear about the French government collapsing every other week. You hear that the US government is on shutdown. It's a political collapse, not a full-on collapse of the structure and country. The Communist Party will decide to hold elections as a way to appease the people, and that gets them replaced. Poland becomes a democratic country in full. And when I say democratic country in this series, it now more so refers to liberal countries, like liberal democracies, definitely getting into the spirit of democratic socialism. And that's kind of backed by the whole prosperity thing, the wealth gap being pretty much eliminated. But Poland becomes a liberal democracy, and another communist country falls off the face of the earth. Hey, you guys aren't here anymore. Get out of here. Anyway, now leaving the European region, we're heading on over to South America. And, well, interestingly enough, a coalition has just formed here, and it stems from the nations up here in the northwest. Previously, they created this military alliance as a way to deter Brazil, but it has now found other meaning, and that meaning lies with this country right here. The red team will join the coalition, the purple team will join the coalition, and so do the orange team, the dark red team, the lime team, and even the teal team. This is the largest coalition since the coalition of the willing, but what is the purpose of this coalition? Because remember, it originally, with this alliance up here, was made to deter Brazil and to stop Brazil from ever getting back these lands over here. Well, for the most part, the Brazilian Brazilian government has actually been very friendly with these guys. And on the topic of the Brazilian government, I do know that you guys have been calling me out a lot about Brazil's capital and how the fact like this city was destroyed. And that is factually correct. So we're going to move Brazil's capital. And specifically, it has been moved right here. Remember, this city was a holdout in World War V. It's a city that has a lot of importance to the people of Brazil now because it kind of symboled the bastion of hope that Brazil had, the holdout that the Brazilian army had here. And even though it was a fascist regime, they do still find some love for that aspect. And what better place to move your government to? Because like a lot of these cities up here have been destroyed. I should actually probably update that as well. Oh yeah, same thing with Colombia's capital. That's kind of important. I'm not really sure how I missed that in the peace treaty. But yeah, their new capital will be right there. Anyway, back on topic. Sorry for doing that and kind of distracting you. But the South American democratic countries, plus this one communist guy right here, they feel like that maybe Brazil isn't the problem. Maybe it's the ideology of these countries that's the issue, because once again, they've become pretty friendly with Brazil. There's even talks about creating a South American economic alliance, but before we can do that, there's just a few sticks in the mud down here, and what better one to start with than the yellow country here? Now, is there plans to also take out the brown country? Maybe, probably, but we'll have to see if this one is successful first. The Democratic Coalition of South American nations now declares war on the yellow team, and their goal is not only to take back historic lands, but also to topple their government and install a friendly democratic one. And the dictator of this country is absolutely terrified. Now, the Assembly of Nations is going to go ahead and like watch over this. They're going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to pretend we didn't see that, because remember, the Assembly of Nations, not a big fan of non-democratic countries, considering the fact that most of the members are all democratic nations. But yeah, the yellow team is in some pretty deep water here. Now, they will go ahead and have some success over here in the far eastern regions, specifically against the lime team here, who is a fairly weak country that isn't going to be doing too much. They kind of serve as a buffer zone between the yellow team and the orange team, who is a lot more stronger than the green team. But even then, when they reach the border of the orange team, it's not like, you know, it's all sunshine and rainbows, because the orange team is just going to start to invade their troops, and well, they're going to get pushed back. And eventually, when the troops from all of these countries start to reach over to this front line, the yellow team's little expansion here is very short-lived. They're pushed all the way back out, and an invasion into their country ensues as the lime team is able to capture this major city down here. Down to the front line between these two countries, remember, they actually used to be united historically. If we take a look at the religion map, we can see that they were from the lime team, and then they split up due to differences, and then one invaded the other, and tensions have been pretty bad since then. But these are a common people, and the red team might definitely be able to use that to their advantage. Now, what does the brown team think about all this? Well, time's a ticking, and they know that if they join this war, that it might just not be a good thing for them to do, because Brazil is kind of hovering over the situation, and Brazil's looking down here at these two guys, and they're like, hey, we changed our government, we're a lot happier now, so you know, just a little bit of a shoulder nudge there. Don't get involved in the war, just let it happen. Let it happen. So the brown team's leader is a little bit too scared to get involved in the conflict, because he thinks that maybe he can mend relations with these countries, maybe become friendly with them so they won't invade him. But being jumped by a bunch of weak countries that you used to bully definitely would be humiliating. He doesn't want to risk it. Little does he know, though, that, like, not getting involved is definitely more riskier than getting involved, because like working together with the yellow team, you might have a chance, but on your own, especially after this, if they win this, you're cooked. Yeah, he's a coward. Anyway, the red team is having a lot of success down here in the south. And what is being discovered here is that the people of the yellow team are in support of the coalition against their government. Things could be worse in this yellow team country. It's not like they're the worst off, but they do have a fascist government. And seeing how the world has pretty much democratized and all of this great stuff has been happening for the development of humanity, the people here want some of that, because the fascist regime has kind of like held restraints over the development of their people, and the economics are pretty far behind in respect to the modern system. So hey, they want change. And the red team is only a few hundred kilometers from the capital city of this country. Wait a minute, they got two capitals. Wait a minute. I don't know how that happened. Okay, actually, I figured it out. This used to be the capital of the red team, and the red team never got a new capital. So I guess I neglected this map a lot in South America specifically. So the red team's capital is right here now. This is not the capital of the yellow team. The capital of the yellow team is all the way up here. So kind of just regarding what I just said about the fact that they're really close to the capital city, the red team is actually going to see even more success down here due to the fact they're super far from the capital, and the further you get from the capital, the less control the government has. And knowing that the people here aren't too happy with their actual government, it means that more and more people can join the ranks of the red team, and we see them do things that people didn't think they could do. Anyway, back over to the lime country, they begin to move out even more as well, and the yellow team at this point, they're just kind of cooked. Their whole citizenship thing, you know, the people of the country, why did I say it like that? Their whole population at this point is kind of like not doing what the government is telling them to do. Eventually, a joint civilian and military movement down here in the center of this country will go ahead and break away from the fascist government. This is the Free Chilean Army, and you guessed it, they want to be free. The brown team, seeing how the yellow team is now internally struggling, is going to start to clamp down on their people even more. They're going to go ahead and invoke even more restraints on their citizens, which will of course be met with civic backlash, but you know, you're a fascist country, so go ahead and, you know, deal with that backlash, if you know what I mean. Back up north, the Peruvians, along with the other northwestern South American countries, will go ahead and take the major city that is closest to the capital city of the yellow team, and then they reach the outskirts. Very not good. The Free Chilean Army also moves up there and reaches the outskirts of the major city, and using the power of friendship, they'll take it. With the blue team now in control of the capital city and hence the government of the yellow team, they're going to order the rest of the remaining military of the fascist country to go ahead and give up their arms and stand down and take orders from the new government. We see that works in a majority of the areas around this country, as the blue team will go ahead and take it, but some military men hold out up here in the northeast of the country. Not that it really matters though, because they're going to get overwhelmed eventually. And the South American coalition is successful in their jumping of the northern Chilean country. So let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. Anyway, in this treaty here, we see that the yellow team, first of all, gets all of its borders restored to what it was a few decades ago. I think it was around episode 60 that I pulled it from. So that is, you know, pre-World War IV borders. So at this point, maybe a century ago, actually. But on top of that, the people of this country will be given a decision. Do you want to stay and be a part of the new government in this country? Or do you want to join the red team down here, who is a little bit more stable, a little bit more better off? A majority of the south of the country will decide to join the red team, and then the north will stay on its own. Now, why didn't they just, you know, fully unite under one big country? Remember, these are the same people in both of these countries. Well, that's two reasons for that. So first of all, these two countries have been separate for a very long time, so of course there's going to be some distinctions between the people now. They're not exactly the same. They were derived from the same place, of course, which was Persindia, but as the border between those two countries was established, the people did grow further apart. It wasn't bad enough to where they couldn't unite under one. As you can see here, they've taken a bunch of land from these guys. But that leads us into our second part, which is the fact that the red team is a communist country. Going from a fascist government to a communist government is a very big leap. Complete different sides of the political spectrum, and a lot of people were worried about that. So they decided to stay up north here and form a new democratic government. With this occurrence, we have a few changes actually happening in South America now. First of all, the red team, well, no, that's just a big piece of Brazil. But the red team will make the decision to go ahead and join the Assembly of Nations. And I do believe that they are the last communist country in the world to hold out from the Assembly of Nations. So there are no longer any communist countries that are not in the Assembly of Nations. They have all joined. But on top of that, the new democratic government of the yellow team will make the decision to also join the Assembly. So they join in and get membership pretty easily. But interestingly enough, this little alliance that South America has going, it hasn't disbanded yet. It's still here. So the coalition might be permanent. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's episode of What If Civilization Started Over. If you guys did enjoy today's episode, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Once again, the WICSO merch and also the 200k merch, which is more important than the WICSO merch because the 200k merch is limited edition. You're not going to be able to get that a few months from now. The WICSO merch, though, is permanent for now, but that stuff is getting super close to releasing. So let me know how you feel about that down in the comments. Let me know how you feel about today's video also down in the comments. There were a ton of wars that were covered, such as the war between Russia and the former Pentagon Alliance, the South American Coalition, and then also the Libyan Civil War. That had a lot of changes. Anyway, once again, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Andrew Rowe 2, Apex, Omega the YouTuber, Terminator, Aiden Shank, Icy Static FN, See What I Do, CTG on YT, AdizzPro, Euroball, Bren, Jazzy Gerboa, Green France Mapping, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Vista, Knighthood 7353, GNR95, Ozgeo, Big, A Norwegian, RS, and Golden Ball Mapping, Zalance, Laser Taze, Augusto, Pablo Sigma Cat, and Hammer Toad 45. Once again, thank you guys.